Hello, everybody. This is the Progress Report because it's Wednesday, and we do a Progress Report every Wednesday at 7 p.m. And so here we are with my dear good friend Mike Farley and my colleague in this misadventure for 10 years.
Yep.
Wow. 10 years.
We've passed 10 years. We're moving into the 11th year of this project.
Jesus.
It's been a lot of fun.
Mostly.
We've gotten to talk to a lot of people.
We've had to call the police once upon a time.
Well, not every discussion
calls.
goes well. Not every discussion goes well, but we came back from it.
You coined the phrase "the most dangerous hour on TV." And once in a while, it seems like it.
It can be, but
but here we are, and I really want to apologize, folks. Last Wednesday, which we were really looking forward to, we did not put on a show, and I was busy with Hillsborough County delegation requirements, because when they elect you this magnificent job of being a state rep, $100 a year, thank you very much, you get to do two jobs. You get to be a Hillsborough County delegate plus a state rep, and that was a requirement.
I figured we could kill 10 minutes just talking about that whole county delegation thing, Bob. I was really planning on doing that.
Oh, boy, that would really make eyes glaze over in Hillsborough County.
You didn't miss much, folks.
I will say that Hillsborough County is financially healthy. That's good to know. And we did get a quorum. We passed. We don't want to talk about that.
No.
Because we have a
more fun
terrific guest here today. The Dean of New Hampshire Political Reporters, Kevin Landrigan. How long have you been in New Hampshire, Kevin?
Well, I'm from New Hampshire originally, but...
Are you? You're an actual native?
I am.
I'm guilty of that, too.
Yeah, but been covering politics here, presidential politics since 1980.
1980?
Yeah.
My goodness.
But I did work in Massachusetts, covered politics there for about 8 years.
Yeah?
In the 1980s, when Mike Dukakis was governor.
I remember.
Ed King was governor, too.
Yeah.
Back in those days.
I certainly remember those folks.
Yep.
And you've been the number one political reporter for the National Telegraph.
Before, yep.
And then
absolutely.
you had a time when you were doing it for WMUR.
For NH1 News, actually.
NH1 News, and now for the Union Leader, which is very blessed to have somebody with your insights and your experience and your knowledge. And, I don't spend a lot of time reading the Union Leader these days because it doesn't seem to take that long. But when you're in there, Kevin, I am totally involved in everything you have to say all the time. And so we're just really pleased to have you with us. And since, although it's been, it's now been a week and a day since the New Hampshire primary, another stunning primary, and thank goodness it all worked out well. There was not a Iowa caucus-type meltdown.
No, I'm going to disagree. Not thank goodness. Thanks to the hard work and experience of the people that put on New Hampshire elections. There was no goodness or luck involved.
I could get into that with you because there was some interesting things happening in Concord when we had the state address by Governor Sununu. And
maybe we can talk about that.
Well,
I'd love to get into that with you.
Well,
I'd love to roll around with you, Bob.
I don't want to crowd Kevin out here because he's...
No, that's okay.
When Governor Sununu came to give State of the Address, of course, they bring in the senators, they bring in the Supreme Court, New Hampshire Supreme Court justices, they bring in the heads of the departments, and then they bring in the Secretary of State. Wild applause for Bill Gardner. Wild applause. But it was mostly on the Republican side. That is pretty interesting because Bill Gardner has always, at least nominally, been a Democrat. But he's the most vociferous supporters now are on the other side of the aisle.
Well,
let's not get into the politics. He did a great job. We needed to have the ship sail straight and true after the Iowa fiasco, and it did.
We look very good by comparison.
And Dave Scanlon, and it was great. It just the election went off without a hitch, and we looked great. But then
it's not just them, Bob. It's the people, the frontline people that are checking folks in at the polls, the selectmen, the
That's
poll
right.
watchers,
It's a tremendous
the moderators,
effort.
the clerks, all of those. And then the thing people don't remember after the polls close, those hours of counting all the ballots, making sure the numbers add up so that not a single ballot gets lost and every single ballot gets counted.
Yep.
We do it right here.
We do it right here. And we do a lot of elections, and we get them mostly right. And despite the claims of some, like Orange 45, there's not a lot of voter fraud in New Hampshire. Not to say nobody's ever voted that shouldn't. Of course, that's going to happen when you have any event with this many people, but it's minuscule. So, Kevin.
Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Yeah,
Welcome to the
great to be
show.
here.
Here we are, jabbing away, and you're our guest, and we want to hear what you got to say.
That's all right.
What is your take on this primary compared to the other primaries you've covered? I've got some interesting, I hope interesting thesis to suggest, but let me just open up to you. Where do you think the New Hampshire primary stands? How do we do this time? Not just in counting the votes, which I think, again, as we've been saying, we did well, but
Yeah.
where's the whole thing stand in the long term, and how do we do?
Well, certainly, I think New Hampshire's can be happy with the performance that occurred, as both you folks pointed out. I think it's a testament to the training that goes on the local level. Almost all these folks, except the professional city clerks, are volunteers and do a terrific job. And I think it's very important that happened because I think going forward, we're going to have to work very hard to defend the status that we have as first in the nation in the future. What Iowa has done is really, the problems they had are going to increase scrutiny even more on these early states, and whether there needs to be more diversity in terms of minority voters, more electorate that looks more like the rest of America than exists right now. I think, as I say, I think our performance was good, and I think the story we have to tell is very good as well. I think, once again, we did the job that New Hampshire prides itself on doing, which, by the way, isn't picking presidents. I mean, that's a
It's
mistake.
winnowing the field, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's basically giving to the rest of the country a finite number of candidates to choose from, starting with, more than 24 people who ran for this job. It's certainly safe to say that, there's only 4 or 5 people now who can feasibly win this nomination.
Yeah.
And you certainly could make a case. There's even fewer than that right now, given what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. We're going to have, in less than 2 weeks now, this thing really ramps up dramatically. I mean, by March 3rd, after that day is done, 40% of the delegates will have been chosen. So you're going to have a pretty good idea of what the rest of this nomination fight is going to look like by that point. And given you've got 14 states on the same day to vote.
Well, we've
State-
always had Super Tuesday. I think it's
We
the,
have.
the addition of California.
Yeah, California and Texas, both. That's such a big pot of delegates. But you're right. We've always had a Super Tuesday. It's predominantly, historically, been a state, an election day in which the South plays a much bigger role than they
Yes.
do this time.
Not so much this time, huh?
Not so much this time. Florida moved back. You've got you've got North Carolina, you've got Virginia, and you've got Arkansas. But that's really and Texas. But the rest is spread out across the country. So, what's interesting to me is to think about what happens if, which is to say, what happens if Trump wins a second term? Well, if Trump wins a second term, the National Democratic Party is going to do away with Iowa. It's going to be gone. Mm-hmm. And once they do that, they're going to look at, well, what should replace Iowa in the front of the line? And do we put a state ahead of New Hampshire in the front of the line? Or do we, that's what makes this weekend very interesting. We're already seeing published reports about concerns about Nevada and how that vote is going to go, because that might be a logical replacement for Iowa by the National Democrats.
But they may have the same problems that
They
Iowa
might,
did.
and that's what we're seeing. is that-
Anything that does go ahead of us has to be a caucus, something other than a primary election because of our law.
That's right.
So-
We'll just keep moving ahead of them, and and we'll
And
have
we've
to.
seen years where that has kind of happened,
It
where
has.
it's gotten really close to
Right.
the first of the year. you
Right,
know.
and we certainly that's not always ideal, but I think we can as I say, I think we can be really.
But the thing is,
pleased about-
if they were to bring Nevada up,
Yep.
it would be eligible, I guess, is what I
It
was
would.
trying to say, because
And I
it is a
think-
caucus.
Right.
But that depends on how they pull it off.
Right,
because-
exactly. If you look on social media, a number of people, even folks who serve on the Democratic National Committee Rules Committee, have speculated about, maybe Nevada's the logical pick,
Yeah.
to move up. That this would be the fourth election cycle in which they've been in the top four.
And it would solve the diversity question,
would.
or maybe if not solve,
Right.
at least address the diversity
Right,
question.
and also having a state you'd have both coasts voting essentially in the first two states, Nevada, New Hampshire.
It is attractive.
that
If
could-
you
that
don't
might
come
work.
from the point of view that caucuses are inherently undemocratic, and
Right.
I mean that
Well, and
whole
that's-
argument.
Right, sure.
So, even when they work, and especially when they don't work, you know what I mean? It's just
Right.
it was kind of a black
Yeah,
eye to
and-
start with.
And people talk about the vagaries of Iowa, as they should, and in the past we have. But Nevada, because it is a small state, but the turnout is even proportionally even much smaller in Nevada than it historically has been in Iowa. We'll see how it does. The other thing about Nevada caucuses is it's not statewide. They have different events in parts of the state, but it's concentrated around Las Vegas. And that's one of the reasons why this whole debate about the culinary union
Yep.
and Bernie Sanders and,
their
Medicare
and their
for all,
excellent health plan. you
they're
know?
extremely powerful in
Yeah.
the Nevada caucus. 70% of the vote in Nevada comes out of Clark County, which is essentially Las Vegas and its suburbs around it.
yeah.
So if you can wrap up that union support, it goes a long way to winning the caucus. I mean, that's what.
And they haven't endorsed this year.
That's what Barack Obama did in 2008 to beat Hillary Clinton, and that's what Hillary Clinton did in 2016 to beat Sanders narrowly, but defeat him. So, but I'm just still kind of stunned at how big the turnout was in both parties, and particularly in the Republican Party, given that there wasn't really a contest. I mean, Trump gets almost 84% of the total vote. That's not really a race, but I think it reflects what is out there, which is nationally, which is there's a lot of enthusiasm among the base in both parties. They're really jazzed up. They're both spoiling for a fight, and
Indicates the base is rather bigger than we may have, some of us would have dared to believe
right,
possible.
right. I think sure, absolutely. I mean that, that big a vote that they received, almost 150,000 Republican ballots. Trump gets almost 130,000 votes
Excuse me.
in that race with no contest. I mean, that's twice as much as any incumbent president has ever gotten in New Hampshire. That even
Is that right?
You're right. I mean,
Twice as much.
right. Clinton almost twice as much. Bill Clinton in '96 got the most. That was a really historically high turnout, and Clinton, of course, was quite popular. And the economy, much like now, was quite good. So he got 76,000 votes, and that was the record up to this point. So that does reflect a very solid support for this president among their core
Very intense
constituency.
enthusiasm. They came
Right.
out when they didn't have to.
Right.
But were you at all surprised? I thought Bill Weld did a heck of a lot better than I thought he would. I thought he'd be at like 1%, and he certainly surpassed that.
Yeah,
Did that surprise
about
you, or-
9%. It's okay. I mean, for somebody who really didn't have much paid media going on, I don't think he was on television until like the last 10 days of the election. It was
Right.
very token. It was very,
Yes, that's
you know,
right.
There was that, and as we saw in the run up to the primary, Trump took New Hampshire seriously. I mean, he had two major rallies here, one in August and then one on the eve of the primary. The vice president came here 3 times in the past year and a half to New Hampshire.
Well, he still
So-
thinks he was defrauded out of the victory in New
Well,
Hampshire.
I think the Trump folks are very optimistic about winning New Hampshire in November. Now, and I think one of the reasons why he's invested the sort of time here is to be sure he can't be certain he can run the table on every state he took in 2016. I mean, you have to, if you're Trump, you have to, have not just one plan of action, the old plan of action. You've got to be able to try and compete and try and win in states that you didn't win in 2016, because it's not reasonable to assume you're going to win everywhere
Yeah.
that you did before. So New Hampshire's prime territory, as far as they're concerned, for a state they could win that they didn't win last time.
Do you think
So-
the?
well, go ahead.
Do you think I'm going to call them, in my opinion, the voter suppression, the new voter suppression laws that were in effect. I seem to notice that there was a decline or a less than expected turnout out at literally Durham and Hanover, and I equated it with those new laws. You got more insight than I do. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think we're still looking at those numbers. Certainly, the vote out of the college towns, the total vote out of all those college towns was off about 10% from 2016. But again, there were contests in both parties in 2016, so you might expect a little bit of that.
Except we had this super enthusiasm on the Republican side, so
Right, right,
maybe
and you also, and you also had, certainly in someone like Sanders, someone who was motivating young voters. The exit polling, for example, suggested to us that the voting population between 18 and 34 is actually up 2% compared to 2016. So another thing we need to look at, and we still haven't seen yet, even a week later, it takes a while, is to know exactly the number of folks who signed up on election day to vote for the first time.
what
Oh, we don't
ballot
have
they
that.
took.
We don't have that.
We don't
data?
have that as yet. That is, they have to certify that under the Help America Vote Act. It takes longer to fill out all those forms and get all those numbers.
Now that's an important number because that could be a predictor
Yes.
of the direction that independent voters are going to go in November, right? That's why we want to have that
Yeah,
info.
yeah, sure. To be sure, that's true. And that's why it'll also tell us what was up with Trump's vote. I mean, if it's that big, was there a pretty sizable, conservative, independent cohort that added to his margin, or was just as all rabid, very strong Republicans who felt, we got to show up because they're fired up over there. That would help tell us that.
So when I originally realized that there was going to be a meltdown in Iowa, after the vote didn't come in and it didn't come in and it didn't come in for hours, then days, then weeks, I thought initially this is going to be great for New Hampshire because we'll get the vote in and we'll report the results. Now I'm not so sure. I mean, I really wonder in the long run whether if Iowa goes down, New Hampshire will be able to maintain its position. What's your thought on that?
Right. Well, that's a legitimate concern, to be sure, and that's what I mean when I said at the outset we're going to particularly see if. Let's accept the alternative scenario I talked about earlier. If Trump wins a second term, we've got worries, and Iowa's gone. But if the Democrats were to win a second term, were to win and defeat Trump, I think it's highly likely we'd stay the same, and Iowa might even stay the same. I mean, historically, usually, for one thing, political parties always defer to the president. Whatever you want, we'll do, in terms of
More now
your
than ever.
re-election. Right?
There were primaries canceled left and right.
Right, they generally do that. And so if a Democrat wins, they may, as messed up as Iowa was, you sort of don't want to mess up the karma. You know, I mean, it is what brought you here. It is what
Yeah.
got you there. And so I think Iowa will try and make a case. Give us one more chance, Mr. President.
I'm sure they
Madam
will. I'm
President,
sure they will.
and let us prove we can do this right. And if we don't do it right, then you can get rid of us. That may well happen. But that's why New Hampshire's future, I think, becomes more complicated depending on who becomes the president.
The ultimate stopper for New Hampshire is we have a state law.
Right.
This
We do.
isn't a party rule.
Right.
We don't have the party run the results. The state does, and our rule and our state statute says New Hampshire is at least 7 days before any other similar event.
But the question is, do the parties award delegates? They don't have to
Well,
if they don't recognize the
they've
election.
tried all that.
Do the
Haven't they?
candidates show
Haven't they
up?
tried all that to punish us?
Yeah,
and,
sure.
And the state law always triumphs. And I've always wondered because Bill Gardner gets almost godlike status for his defense of the New Hampshire primary, and he's been effective, no doubt about it. And many others have, national committee men.
Yep.
This is one place we agree, red or blue. We agree. We want to be first. But ultimately, isn't it the fact that we have a state law, and the thing that saves our state law from ever being trumped in Congress or anywhere else is nobody else can agree on who goes first if we're not.
Right. I think that's true. I mean, our biggest defense, along with the law, certainly always has been the candidates. I mean, because in both parties.
Well, they come here, they don't want to insult us, so they say, we like your primary.
They come here and they get a fair shake.
Yeah.
And they understand that this is a place where, if you meet real voters and you make the case, you got a shot, and you can come from virtually nowhere to win or really come out with a lot of momentum. And we saw that again in this primary with, Senator Amy Klobuchar, frankly, is at 3%, 3.5 weeks before the primary, and she gets almost 20%. Pete Buttigieg, a month before the primary, is in single digits. And he didn't get there because of Iowa, I can assure you. He got there because he made the case here and built an organization.
I like to hear that because I was a Cory Booker guy.
Right. Yep.
That didn't go too far.
No, but
and then I thought maybe Michael Bennett. He's not 70 plus years, and he's not under 40, and he's not married to a guy, and he's all these things, and he's not
touching that.
He's not calling himself a socialist,
Right.
And
Sure.
I thought, but he came here and he seemed to try, but he was kind of a low key guy, but he seemed to try, and it didn't work at all. I mean, it just absolutely crashed. And so my question was, and I guess you've already answered it by pointing out the example you have, is New Hampshire really a place where you can do the Jimmy Carter thing and come in, hold a bunch of house parties, and pull off a tremendous upset against a candidate that's got money and media and all that? I'm not sure you think that's still true, that we can do that? Can you win the New Hampshire primary like what happened, 1964 in a write-in, for God's sakes? Or, doing a bunch of, house parties without doing big events and getting earned media?
Well, certainly, if you're a major candidate for president, you'd rather have money than not have money. But candidates with the most amount of money haven't always won here, and won't always win here.
And I would say you certainly can't do it in California. At
Right.
least you got a shot here. You got a
Right.
better shot here than.
Well, there's that.
Yeah,
There is that.
and that's what I meant by they're always our greatest defenders. Even the folks who don't win here come back and say, "I had a chance in New Hampshire. I got my voice was heard. I got to make my case, and certainly, Senator Michael Bennett and Andrew Yang and Deval Patrick have all had nice things to say about New Hampshire as they've exited this race, even though it just didn't work out for them. Bennett, frankly, just got in the race too late, much like Patrick did. It didn't help.
Last day.
He got,
Very last day.
exactly. And, he got prostate cancer and was fighting that. And that certainly delayed him getting in. So I think the campaigns and the candidates will help us hopefully keep the date in the future.
On that optimistic note, I think we are at our break time.
We are well past
should
our
sit
break,
back
but it's
and,
been a really interesting discussion.
When we come back, though, I want to throw in the $16 billion gorilla and see how that affects your analysis
Sure.
of what happens to New Hampshire depending on who wins the White House.
Maybe
what
we'll
if it's
get some more insight into that tonight after
we'll
after you're
see.
through watching the progress report. There's
There's
another
a great
show you might
debate
want
coming
to
up. But
watch.
let's take a quick break, regroup, and we'll figure out where we're going to go next, folks.
And-
Don't
and
forget to
le-
call in.
And let me just remind folks, we love our callers, 640-3091. We would love to have you participate. We got somebody here with knowledge and insight that you will find unmatched in the state of New Hampshire into our political life.
We
That's
welcome your insight, too, and your questions. So
Kevin
give us a call.
Landrigan is with us.
See you in a minute.
Hey, everybody, this is the progress report for this Wednesday. It is February 18th, isn't it?
19th.
19th. That's, of course, it's the 19th. We
Yep.
had a long session day in Concord, folks, and tell some stories from there, but I'm not going to do it tonight because we have an outstanding guest with us. The great, insightful, and perceptive and able writer Kevin Landrigan, who is so knowledgeable about our political life here at all levels. And, of course, we've just come
Because
through.
everybody talks to him, you know?
Well, who wouldn't want to?
He gets in there and he hears things that the rest of us don't get to hear. That's why we love having you on.
Yeah,
you
we
know?
love having you
Spill
on,
it.
Kevin. We really do. We've talked about a number of things. Let me just talk about something, and this is something NHPR did a whole big thing on, and you went national endorsements. I was quoted on that, saying I didn't think they amounted to much. But in a sense, perhaps they do. Do you think endorsements count for much in the New Hampshire primary anymore?
I certainly think they can't hurt, and they can help give. You know, they refer to it as the first primary, winning the endorsements of the activist core. That's the first election,
Yeah.
so to speak, you're really running. But I don't think they're worth as much as they used to, and I think primarily that's
Certainly for newspaper endorsements, I don't think they're used to what they used to be.
no.
Maybe newspaper endorsements are less worthy than they used to be, even than political figures endorsements.
Well, Senator Klobuchar really made hay of the fact that she had both liberal and conservative
She
newspaper
did,
endorsements,
which
and
was kind of
that-
interesting.
That didn't hurt her, did it?
No,
in
it did
this
not.
race?
No,
and
she
I
came up.
and she kept going back to it over and over again. Talked all her paid media at the end were talking about that, and
you know,
it was
quite
interesting.
frankly, I as a more liberal person didn't see that as bait. You know,
Right.
oh really?
Yeah.
You got the union leader endorsement? Not so much. You know, I again, no
Right.
offense to the union
No,
leader, but
not
I
at
know
all.
where they come from, and
Right.
and I'm out here
Yep.
thinking about a Democratic primary, but it hit the sweet spot with some
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I think it helped in a very crowded field to sort of get enough voters.
Kinda
at least-
highlighted her a little
Get
bit.
enough voters at least
Yeah.
to take a look at her.
when you
But-
get an endorsement or a co-endorsement in the New York Times
Yeah.
and the union leader for the same person, that's kind of unique.
yeah,
I don't think that's happened
yeah.
very often.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah, and I was in the Warren camp, and that co-endorsement really puzzled me. You know?
What was unique about this primary was that a lot of very politically active people either didn't endorse in this race or endorsed very late, so the impact was less than it otherwise would have been. Because as you get closer and closer to the election, most voters are have become more and more informed about the
Right,
candidates.
they've already met them once or twice, you
and,
know,
and are trying to get more and more information about them, and are really less influenced by, this state senator I like is on board with so and so, or this person I don't like has supported them. I think they tend to have less impact as you get closer to the election. And we saw a lot of prominent, as I say, a lot of prominent Democrats sit this race out. You know, both senators from New Hampshire sat it out, even though Maggie Hassan isn't up for re-election this year. Congressman Chris Pappas, one-term Democrat, he decided this thing is too muddied. I'm staying out of this. And
But we
so
have Congressman Custer making endorsement.
yes, and for Buttigieg, and campaigned a lot with him, and certainly
And
if
he
you-
did well in the second CD, didn't he?
Yeah,
I
he
seem to
did
remember
actually.
that his color.
Yeah, what
showed
was
up.
interesting about, and just doing kind of a post-mortem of the Bernie Sanders campaign, one of the reasons why this race became as close as it became was particularly in that Connecticut Valley. If you look in the communities along the Connecticut Valley that go up towards Hanover, Buttigieg won Hanover, the seat of Dartmouth College, which you wouldn't expect. And he also won a number of communities around Hanover in Grafton County. And Sanders underperformed in that part of the state much more than in the
Which
rest
had
of the
been his
state.
wheelhouse.
Yeah,
in the
exactly. And that
prior-
was
prior run.
and that was certainly a surprise to them, to be sure. If you're a candidate who's struggling for attention, endorsements can help. But particularly in a field this big, and in a campaign that went as long as it did, I think they were less meaningful. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
and in elections, I think the power of, social media and the power of, celebrity in politics, not just Trump, but just the persona of a politician today. And with 24 cable, I just think endorsements mean less than they used to. Certainly, you look at a guy like Trump, who had really, 2 members of Congress supporting him before the New Hampshire primary. When he ran for president in 2016, it didn't matter.
Yeah. Sure didn't.
And so, and as we saw in this race, a lot of candidates who had a lot of early endorsements, like Cory Booker, even Kamala Harris had a number of them, just never got off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but what
So
that's worth.
my initial reaction when the primary results came in New Hampshire, right on schedule, not any question about the validity of the vote, it was just great, was that Bernie hadn't done that well. That was my thought. He only beat Mayor Pete by a couple of points, and he's a neighboring senator who got a little bit better than 60% against Hillary Clinton. Now, a lot of candidates, so you would not expect him to get that, but him to drop to 24 from 60 in 4 years, and yet he seems to have gotten the momentum out of it he needs. He's apparently now leading in not only in Nevada but in the betting for taking the whole damn thing. What's your thought on that?
Right. Well, I think that's the story of New Hampshire, which is the winner of the New Hampshire primary always gets more out of New Hampshire than anybody else, even if it's by a narrow margin.
Yeah.
And this was really,
But
it's not only
look at Bill Clinton, who did not win New Hampshire but
Right.
came in second after
He did.
overcoming some real challenges to his
Right.
campaign in the Hampshire primary,
And a lot of-
then called himself the comeback kid.
he did.
And
a
why,
lot of
why could not Mayor Pete said, and Mayor Pete could have said, if it hadn't been for Amy Klobuchar's late surge to a strong third, he would have won.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Klobuchar really denied him the victory. There isn't any doubt about that, because if you look at where,
And on the other side
Where
of
Amy
that,
did.
I think Sanders sure put a shoulder into Warren's campaign and kind of pushed her out of that lane a little bit.
He certainly
I mean,
did.
she's still fighting, but
Yeah, I don't-
He's
I mean,
got the width of that lane, I think, right
yeah,
now.
I really don't see where she goes. I don't know where she goes to win now. After kind of underperforming in both Iowa and New Hampshire. And I don't think Nevada's going to be a good story for her. Maybe it will. Maybe I'll be shocked. She spent some time there. But they're right now, she's traveling all over the place, but her staffs from New Hampshire are kind of encamped in Super Tuesday states. They didn't go to Nevada. They didn't go to South Carolina. They've primarily gone to places like Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina, where they think they have a better chance of breaking through, but it's going to be very hard for her. It's often what New Hampshire does, which is, and sometimes a lot of candidates don't realize it until after the fact, is that is you can't underperform in New Hampshire badly and recover. I mean, I certainly think a case can be made. That's what's happened to Joe Biden. We'll see.
I was just going to ask you about him.
But I really have my doubts that, and it's not just popular support.
Fifth was not even making double digits for a former vice president.
Right, and it's not just, and this is 3 for 3 here. This guy has run for president three times,
his third time.
And for the third time, he's bombed in New Hampshire. And at some point, there's a message there that, everybody likes Uncle Joe and thinks he's a great guy and was a successful vice president and really accomplished senator, but can't get it done when he runs for the big job. And so that's what raises the stakes so high for him, not so much this weekend, but in South Carolina. I think that's his Waterloo.
Firewall, right?
I really do. And he's always said, I mean, with almost 2/3 of the electorate minority and almost 60% of it African American in South Carolina, he's got to win, and not just win there. He's got to win big, in order to.
But if he does, doesn't that really shake up the field?
It does.
And
it could.
And it starts looking like a pool table with people going all over for Super Tuesday.
Right.
Brian was saying we had a caller, Lisa.
We do.
Oh, great.
Let's
be
welcome
good.
our caller. No, it looks like we lost her. Lisa, sorry.
Lisa, if you want to call back, we'll put you right on the air. We're sick of having just male voices here. We'd love to have your female tones grace our show. So if you want to call back, please do. We'd be happy to put you right on. Kevin, you've covered primaries, you said, going back to 1980.
Right.
And that was Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter.
You're right, his re-election. Right.
My goodness.
Right.
Which of the primaries you've covered do you think was most like this, or is this absolutely unique in the history, in that
like
long
this
history?
one, huh?
Yeah, this was certainly different, to be sure. I mean, I remember in '84, when Reagan was running for re-election, they referred to the seven dwarfs. There are actually more candidates than that, but that's what Reagan's henchmen referred to.
Was
the
that
Democrats
the famous thing with the Nashua Telegraph and
I paid for this
No, that
microphone?
was in 1980.
That was in 1980.
Right.
Okay.
Again, Reagan and Bush. In Reagan's re-election, you had a very similar Democratic field in that a number of prominent people in the party, many of whom just could never really get it going. I mean, much like the kind of experience Biden had here. John Glenn in '84 was,
right.
The guy with the right stuff, the astronaut, the senator. He's going places. He's going to be terrific, But he crashed and burned.
It does happen here, doesn't it?
Well, we have another caller. Looks like we've got Robert on the line.
Hey, Robert.
Robert, are you there?
This is Robert saying hello to Robert.
Hi, I'd like to comment on the Democratic primary stuff on TV.
Sure, we'd love to hear it.
First of all, I don't believe that CNN, I do believe there should be a participant, but there should not be the big dog in a picture. Okay, there's the determining factor is how much money did you raise, and there's a lot of people that deserve to be on that stage, but they weren't.
Yeah.
All of a sudden comes Bloomberg, with his massive amount of money, and suddenly he's on.
Yeah.
And the other comparison I would like to make is, those debates are not really what you call debates,
Absolutely.
It's just moderators asking a bunch of questions in succession. Now, conversely, I've been watching the other stuff, like what the stuff's coming up in Nevada and whatnot, and it's one-on-one, asking direct questions by different facilitators, and that's for me is a lot better than what we're experiencing. I think that the format for the debates is basically phony. I may be wrong, but I'd like some input on that.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks. A couple great observations.
A couple of really good points, Robert.
Basically the town hall format that sometimes we see, and I do have to give, props to Channel 9. Really did a great job in
Yes.
that little series that they put together
Sure.
as far as
Conversation
making
with
them
the
available.
candidates and, yep.
But I think you see his point. You see Robert's question. I mean, what's your observation on that? Are these candidate showcases that we see, are they real debates? Could they be improved?
Yeah, I think they certainly could be improved. When you have that many candidates on stage at one time, it's really hard to get a whole lot of give and take. But again, it's important to keep in mind, while the broadcast, and Robert's right, while the broadcasts on stations like CNN and MSNBC, they're party-run entities. These are Democratic National Committee approved events. So, and my point is this: when the party controls a debate, they don't want a debate. Mm-hmm.
They want a showcase.
Exactly. They just want an infomercial, right? That allows all these candidates to promote themselves and
didn't the League of Women Voters used to
right, they
put
do,
these
and in
on?
the
It was-
general election,
and
that's
they'll
who
be back
runs
to take
them,
care of these,
exactly,
okay.
and that's why you see in general election debates a lot more exchange. This is the 9th debate we're going to have later tonight, and there hasn't been one candidate ask another candidate a question in any of these debates. That's not a debate.
That's not a
okay?
debate.
Sorry.
You're exactly
You know,
right.
instead you've got these canned questions from moderators. And a lot of the questions are kind of mini gotchas. They're really not meant to talk about an issue that matters to voters, but rather, you voted for this 15 years ago. Why have you changed your mind? I mean, just stuff that, frankly, just isn't going to elucidate a lot for voters. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen, for the most part, most of these debates not move voters. This last debate
the New Hampshire
before the
debate seems
primary
to have done that.
The last debate before the primary did do some of that, and I think Klobuchar really performed really well in that debate, and I think that certainly helped her, to be sure. And Vice President Biden did not perform well in a lot of these debates, and I think they hurt him. Sure, but that's one of the things I lamented about, and I do again lament about the state of campaigning and grassroots campaigning, and the difference that exists here, which is to say, look at that last week after after Iowa votes. 24 Cable News spent 4 days ruminating about what's happening in Iowa instead of talking about what these candidates are saying in New Hampshire. It drove me crazy. That's all they spent their time on, because that's 24 Cable News. They only know how to stick to one trick, and until they can answer that trick, they stick to that trick. I mean, it's one of the reasons
that's
why
true.
you turn on a 24-hour cable show and they're talking about something Trump said 4 days ago. Why? Because it's still controversial, and it's still they still think it gets viewers,
And
but it's
Trump-
not news anymore.
Yeah.
But they keep doing it. And
Not
I
only
think-
news, it's breaking news.
right?
It's always
and that,
breaking
right,
news.
and that's
now.
what I think
No
frustrates.
other kind of news anymore. They got breaking news.
But in that last week between Iowa and the New Hampshire primary, on one night we had 4 hours of CNN town halls. On the next night we had 4 hours of CNN town halls. On the next night we had 3 hours of a debate. So, and that was 3 of the last 5 days before the primary. So, in all 3 of those days, there was very little campaigning by the candidates, because they were all
They were
appearing
busy
on
prepping
television
and doing.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's just not. That's not the kind of New Hampshire politicking we like to
like it
see.
used to be. Well,
Yeah.
we're up against our second break.
You want to take a quick
I
break?
think we'll take a quick break, but
Is-
when we
we're
come
a-
back, I swear that Robert brought it up in his phone call. I want to talk about Bloomberg.
Sure.
I want to
Okay.
talk about Bloomberg
I got a
before
couple
you
more
go.
things I want to talk about too. Because
So let's take a quick break, folks.
Thanks
Don't
for the
go
call,
away.
Robert.
Come
We'll
back.
be right back. This will be our final segment. It's
Just
gonna
want to
be-
remind folks,
we're-
you're going to see a poster up. There's a great show coming to Manchester March 22nd. Be there.
Well, folks, this is the progress report for this Wednesday, the 19th of February. And, we're driving back from Concord today at a little after 5 o'clock. You could still see the highway.
I
Without,
know, isn't that crazy?
Wasn't nice,
It was
huh?
wonderful.
It was wonderful. We may have some cold tempers, we may have some lousy weather, but the sun is staying up later.
Yeah.
It's just great. It's working just the way we want it
And
to.
that groundhog did not see his shadow, so we're due for a real quick springtime really
Yeah,
soon. So
okay.
we're in good shape.
So I had a couple things I wanted to talk about that
As long as they
suggested.
include Bloomberg, you're good.
Oh no, they don't include Bloomberg, but you shut me off here.
All right, we'll get to it.
I
We'll
wanted
get
to say one thing. What do you think of the Democratic Party's criteria for making the debate stage? The candidates didn't think it's terrible. And I do think it's kind of odd that in these days when we want to fight against money in politics and Citizens United, they made one of the criteria the amount of money you raised or the number of donors you got.
Right.
And
Well,
if you don't do that, what would you suggest? How could we make this a more fair process for people to get this unbelievable advantage of the earned media that they get by being on without having to, pay a lot of dollars for the privilege?
it's true. Certainly the DNC will point out the fundraising requirements included small donors.
Yeah,
and
it
that's
had to be by so many people from so
exactly.
many states, so there
Exactly.
was a broad base
And that's what they
requirement.
were trying to show, is that if you have that many people supporting you with small donations in that many states, and you have a national candidacy, you're not a regional candidate. But as we saw, with this latest debate, the DNC dropped the fundraising requirements and allowing Michael Bloomberg to participate in this debate.
And
in
that
Nevada.
strikes me as funny because they would not bend one bit
No, not
to
at all.
bring diversity to the stage,
Right.
but they'll bend over backwards to bring a billionaire to the stage.
Right.
know?
Yes.
And-
Sad.
and-
That's a sad
And,
commentary.
and I see this as part of the Stop Bernie movement, which it's like bringing in Godzilla to beat Megazon. I don't know. Can you control your monster?
Right. Right. Well, I think there's some of that, to be sure. And we certainly have seen that this week, since New Hampshire happened, there have been a number of published reports about Biden losing a number of his fundraisers to Bloomberg. Basically,
Oh, the irony.
a lot of establishment people basically getting off the Biden train, deciding, that Bloomberg may be the more electable moderate now, and supporting him. But he certainly Bloomberg really hasn't faced the scrutiny until tonight. So
Yeah, tonight's going to
it'll
be very interesting.
Yeah, it will be.
I think
I
this
hope
debate
he
will get a
faces
lot of attention.
How long has he
just
been a
'cause it's so
Democrat?
unique. Yeah. Well, how long has it been since Trump was a Democrat? You go on and on.
Well, that's kind of my point. When you have someone come into a party and take over the party when they don't adhere to its principles, it's not a good thing. That's my point. That's why I wanted to bring this guy up.
Yeah.
This guy has no connection to Democratic principles. He does, it's kind of funny. There's like two Bloombergs. There's the Bloomberg, the philanthropist,
Yes.
that spends a lot of money on very worthy causes
Yep,
that I
yep.
agree
You would
with
support,
completely.
yep.
But when put in a position of actual political power, he totally trashes civil rights and all of the things that people like me hold dear. So I don't know who we're getting, and I really do see him as like Godzilla, like a powerful monster that they think they can control him, but they can't.
Yeah, it'll be
It's
interesting
going to be very interesting
to
indeed.
see how he goes over, to be sure. I think he didn't campaign in any of the early states, but the day after New Hampshire hired a full-time staff, he's already running a general election campaign in New Hampshire.
He hired
He's
Rand Mahoney, who was
Right.
our mayor's chief of staff.
Right, yeah.
Very capable guy.
Yes, very capable, and has continued advertising on cable in New Hampshire and all in New England, which sort of it does make some sense to do it. You've got on Super Tuesday. You've also got Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine all holding primaries on that day. So it's a good idea to do that. But he's.
What do you think of his ad strategy claiming he's endorsed by Barack Obama?
Well, that's a lot of candidates have tried to do that, right? And
I've seen a
used
lot of that,
Obama.
haven't we?
We have, and but to your point, your earlier point, as somebody who's not been a Democrat for a long time, or run for a lot of political office other than running for New York City mayor, I think he's going to find in his campaign a lot of difficulty. He's got a lot to explain for. He's made a lot of controversial statements over the years as a very kind of bombastic, autocratic mayor, which he was in New York City. Popular, again, during good economic times, rode that wave very well.
Pulled a Putin, extended his term beyond
Right.
term limits.
Right, exactly. And so tonight isn't the only night the knives are going to be out for him. And I think it's there's a lot of resentment right now among the candidates towards Bloomberg because he not only didn't pay his dues, there he is on the debate stage in a state where he isn't even on the ballot.
Yeah.
He's not even running in Nevada.
Yeah.
But he gets to participate.
Think how somebody like Elizabeth Warren must feel
you're right.
when the hours and hours
I
and
know.
the plans on every damned issue.
Yeah.
Nobody could have worked harder at this than she
Yes.
did in the history of campaigning for president. And now she's being, made to feel.
Well, we've seen this before. We saw it last cycle. This is not uncommon. This is it's like a
Who
panic
are you thinking
button.
of in last cycle?
Do I have to go there? I mean, Bernie got.
Oh, and then let's not go there.
I don't
No, let's
want to,
not.
but
No, I just didn't get it right away.
I see the patterns. We're going to have it out again, and I don't see it as productive. I really
I
think
certainly agree with
trust
that.
the voters. The voters are the party, not all those guys in Washington, not all those guys that show up on cable TV.
I'm a little more cynical in that. I think, the voters are manipulated more than voters would care to admit to themselves. That's my concern. Which raises another question I wanted to ask you about.
So do we buy into the manipulators then, Bob? I mean,
I'm just saying it's a reality, We think we decide who's going to be president. I'm not so sure we have as much influence as we think we do. It's the money game.
I would agree with that. I would agree
all
with
of
that.
this.
But within the party, if you've got a guy that's starting to run away with the delegates, you got a guy that's leading. If I was the party, I'd hitch my wagon to that. I wouldn't jump in front of it and try to stop it.
Unless you think his claiming to be a socialist is not a good
Who
qualification.
would think that?
I would think that.
I know. There's
I would
something wrong
think
with
that.
thinking.
But I don't want to
That's-
debate.
that's later.
I don't want
That's
to debate
later.
with Mike here. We have our differences, not too many. I wanted to ask you this, and we're getting close to the end, Kevin.
Sure.
When I was first involved in presidential campaign here, believe it or not, it was for Jerry Brown of all people.
Yeah.
And then somebody said, everybody talks about issues, but issues are tissues. In House meetings, everybody wants to talk about the issues. Nobody wants to talk about, did you ever cheat on your wife or stuff like that, or your husband. They want to talk about the issues. But when push comes to shove, do you think the issues really determine who's going to get the nod or not? I think it's about who presents well, who's looking good, who's sounding good. Give us your thoughts.
Well, I mean, in most presidential primaries, the differences among issues really are not significant. They're not cataclysmic. We ruminated for how long about Medicare for all, but virtually all these candidates support a public option, which, I mean, it's not...
Could morph into
it's not-
Medicare for all.
It could, right? I mean,
Yeah.
once you have a public option, everybody can join it. Even
Everybody.
people who oppose Medicare for all believe most people will choose the public option. And private insurance will go the way of the dodo
That's
bird.
right.
I mean,
That's
so...
right.
And they all support gun control, and they're all support some form of a carbon tax or a Green Deal. So I think increasingly with social media and 24/7 news that we have now, the power of personality is more important than it used to be sure. And you can and you certainly can as we've seen with Trump is a perfect example in 2016. You can overcome flip-flops now and being a Democrat one time and then being a Republican and
None of that seems to matter as much as we used to think it
right,
should.
Right,
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Very,
and I
very
think
point-
that-
very
and-
interesting.
And I think that's a change too.
Yeah.
To be sure,
Yeah.
it is.
Well, we're told it's time to wrap it up here, Kevin. Believe it or not, the time goes by so fast when we have
Fast
a,
hour.
a really great guest like you.
Well,
You
thanks
are
so
a
much.
terrific guest.
Enjoyed it.
And we want you to come back soon. And this has been the best wrap-up I can think of to an analysis of our primary and where we're at. And you have such great insights and historical knowledge. It's really just a privilege to have you.
An excellent bridge between what we saw and now what's to come in the next couple of weeks. It's
Right.
it
should be
nice pivot.
fascinating
Yeah.
to see. Right. What?
I'm about to head to the UK because
Great.
we got a vacation week and I have a son over there and grandchildren and all that.
Wonderful.
It'll be interesting to get that perspective and come
Yeah.
back here.
To see what they think.
I
of
will
us.
be really glad to bring back that perspective.
Yeah.
They got Brexit, we got Trump. It's I mean, to me, the Trump thing is so fascinating because it seems to be a worldwide phenomenon of these authoritarian populist guys, and I guess they're all guys, aren't they? Who just are blasting through the
We've
usual
seen these
checks
cycles
and
in our
balances.
history before. This
Right.
certainly isn't the first time we've seen these cycles.
It's the first time in this country, though, isn't it?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Well, can you think of
We could start a show on
we,
that.
We'll get going on that, folks. Maybe you want to chip in next time. We'll be back. And I won't be here next week because I will be overseas. Mike, I don't know if he told you that, but you're on your own for next
Well,
week
we'll,
with whatever
we'll try
help
to
we
put
can
on a
get you.
show.
And I'm sure you'll put on a good one. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
Thank
It's
you.
just a
Yeah,
great
thanks a
pleasure.
Thank you, Mike.
I hope you're around a long time to help inform and keep us all well aware of how's it feel to be in the fourth estate these days? You feel threatened or intimidated, or you're
Not at all.
Okay,
We love
That's
the
good
attention.
news.
Okay.
That's good news.
that's what we want to hear.
Well, folks, we will see you next week. Thanks for watching.
Yep. Bye.